Brothers, ladies and gentlemen and friends, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Wise words from our dear brother Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. I'm Joe Paul, and I proudly serve Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated as the Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer. And folks, we have a panel of incredible guests who will be discussing a historical perspective on the Black male vote. I would like to bring them up one by one and allow them to introduce themselves so they can share a little bit about themselves. Then I'll turn it over to them so they can guide the conversation. Remember, a voteless people is a hopeless people. Without further ado, first up, we'd like to bring up the Honorable Brother Congressman Bobby Scott. Brother Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's certainly a pleasure to be here. And I bring a welcome to the alpha men in the United States Congress: Greg Meeks from New York, David Scott from Atlanta, Al Green from Houston, Emmanuel Cleaver from Kansas City, Danny Davis from Chicago, and Steve Horswood from Las Vegas. And we're looking forward after tomorrow to adding Cameron Webb, who's running in the 5th District in Virginia, and Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's running for the U.S. Senate in Georgia. We're looking forward to adding them to the ranks. And I'm just delighted to see the brothers recognizing that a voteless people is a hopeless people. We know that elections have consequences. And a lot of close races around the country, and young votes particularly can make the difference, and African-American votes can make the difference. And if those votes come out, we can decide whether it's going to be tax cuts for the wealthy or lower interest on student loans and more Pell Grants and health care. Those are the kinds of decisions that will be made by the election tomorrow. So we look forward to people turning out and voting. Elections have consequences, and a voteless people is a hopeless people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Congressman Bobby Scott. Now, I counted, because I'm an alpha man, would that be 9 total brothers in Congress if we pull it off, if we do our thing?
That'd be 9. That'd be 9, and we've had alphas over the years. I chair the Committee on Education and Labor. I'm not the first African American. That honor goes to Brother Adam Clayton Powell, who served in the 60s.
That's right. That's right. Well, Brother Congressman Scott, we're so glad to have you this evening, brother. Coming up next, we'd like to bring up Brother Dr. Robert L. Harris, who is our national historian, as well as the Professor Emeritus at Cornell University. Brother Dr. Robert L. Harris.
Thank you very much, Brother Paul. It's a real pleasure to be on this distinguished panel. I look forward to a very insightful conversation here this evening. And one of the things I want to start by saying is that we've been in this battle over the long haul. In 1957, right after the formation of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, one of their first campaigns was called the Crusade for Citizenship. And many people might not be aware of the prayer pilgrimage for freedom that was held in Washington, D.C. before the Lincoln Memorial. It was one of the first major protest meetings before the Lincoln Memorial. And at that prayer pilgrimage for freedom, he's not cited that much on this score, but Brother Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at that point gave a very eloquent presentation in which he cried out, "Give us the ballot, give us the ballot, and we'll take care of the rest of it." So we've been struggling for the ballot for some time, but despite our best efforts, there's been opposition. And I want to just quote briefly from Carol Anderson, Professor Carol Anderson's book called White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. And she talks about Black advancement triggering Black rage. It's not the mere presence of Black people that is the problem. Rather, it is Blackness with ambition, with drive, with purpose, with aspirations, and with demands for full and equal citizenship. And this is one of the things that the country has been unwilling to afford us, but we're on the move. And I think you'll hear quite a bit about that here this evening from this distinguished panel.
Thank you, Brother Dr. Harris. We look forward to hearing more of your insight. Coming up next, we have Brother Stephen Richardson, who's going to introduce himself, tell you a little bit about our superstar brother. Brother Richardson.
Thanks, Brother Paul. Yes, Stephen Richardson here. Glad to be a Mississippian, Mississippi native here. And our motto as a fraternity is, first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all. And so I've been a servant leader for quite some time, serving in the areas of news, public relations, and law as an attorney. And also I've added on recently as a higher education strategist. So I'm very glad to join this distinguished panel this evening and help educate and empower.
We're so glad to have you, Brother Richardson. We're really excited to hear what you have to say this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, brother. And bringing a collegiate perspective, we have Brother Stewart. Brother Stewart.
Good evening, brother, and everyone who is watching. My name is Cartier Stewart. I am the Assistant District Director for the state of Indiana for Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Currently a student at Ball State University studying musical theater. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to speak. And before I get started, just everyone who has not already voted, make sure that you have a plan to vote tomorrow. Take people with you, make it a priority, and vote like your life depends on it, because it truly does. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Brother Stewart. We look forward to hearing your comments this evening. And last but certainly not least, one of the things you should know, under the leadership of the General President, Brother Dr. Everett B. Ward, we've created an initiative to get an additional 1 million Black men to the polls for this election. And we partnered with numerous organizations, including but not limited to Black Men Vote. And I'd like to bring up Bill Clerk, one of the founders of Black Men Vote, who's going to share a little bit about himself before we get the conversation started. Bill?
Well, good evening, Brother Joe. Well, let me just say I'm an honorary brother. I'm not a member of the, the fraternity. My father is, was when he was living, so maybe I can be an honorary member. In my day job, I'm an attorney, partner in the law firm here in Washington, D.C. I have the privilege of working with Congressman Scott and other members of the Congressional Black Caucus. I am an attorney, but also an advocate, a lawyer, lobbyist. And among the things I work on is justice issues. And you see, I'm not in tie or jacket because I'm advertising the organization and the activity that very much engaged in, which I hope to share with you, called Black Men Vote. So I've been involved in quite a few social justice activities over the years. As I said, I work with Congressman Scott, the brother from Mississippi. I work a lot with Benny Thompson and also with Derek Johnson, two very distinguished Mississippi natives. So over the course of this conversation, I hope I can tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what our vision is, and how we'd like to continue working with the Alphas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Folks, that is our esteem. Well, one more thing. I want to bring up our General President, because, you know, we typically bring him up at the end, but we want to bring him on board. Brother General President, let's bring our General President right back up here. There's our leader. Brother General President, do you want to set the stage?
Well, thank you so much, Brother Paul. I'm glad to be here tonight, and really the importance of Black men voting and everyone voting in this election tomorrow. Of course, Brother Dr. Harris always gives us great knowledge. The discussion of 1957, the SCLC, Dr. King's message, give us the ballot, is so important for us to know how we must continue that legacy. But also, he mentioned Professor Carol Anderson, her book, White Rage. Well, now I'm reading her book entitled One Person, No Vote. One of the things that moved me in the beginning of her chapter 1, when she talks about the historical legacy of our people voting, let us remember tonight Maceo Snaps, a World War II veteran who returned to his native state and decided that he wanted to exercise his right to vote, having fought for democracy abroad. But when he returned, he voted, registered to vote, and a couple of days later was met at his home with gunpoint and shot down because he went to vote, and later died in a segregated hospital for lack of care. So tonight we're remembering those who paid the great price for the right to vote. But now we must remember, we can remember our ancestors for what they did, but the future is now in our hands. So now we must do our part for full citizenship and the right of democracy. Thank you. I look forward to the panel tonight.
Thank you, Brother General President. Folks, we're going to get our conversation started. We're going to bring up all of the panel members, and we're going to turn it over to them because this is why you are here. We're going to give the baton to Brother Dr. Robert L. Harris so they can start a conversation. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, and have a great conversation.
Thank you. I want to ask Brother Congressman Bobby Scott if he would respond to this statement by Vernon Daimler, who gave his life in registering individuals to vote in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, my parents' hometown. And he said, if you don't vote, you don't count. What do you think about that statement?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. In America, all of the governmental decisions stem from the vote. We look at police misconduct. Well, the police didn't fall out of the sky. They were hired by the chief of police, who was hired by in Virginia by the city manager, who was appointed by the city council, who are elected by the people. If you don't like what the police officers are doing, your city council can do something about it. It is a political situation. And so to the extent that people don't like what the police are doing, we are not powerless. We can do something about it, but it stems from the vote. In the George Floyd case, there was a question of whether even the officer was going to get charged with a serious offense. And he was charged with a not so serious offense. And the Attorney General took over the prosecution of the case. The Attorney General is Keith Ellison, who 4 years ago was a real good member of the Congressional Black Caucus, but he decided to run for Attorney General of Minnesota, and he won a close election. He took over the prosecution. Right after he took over, the charges of that officer were enhanced, and the other three were arrested. Now, what would have happened if he had lost that close election? Well, elections have consequences. And the fact that these officers are facing serious charges, all four of them, is a consequence of the fact that Keith Ellison won that election. And so in all of the decisions that we're making in healthcare and policing and criminal justice, and whether or not you can vote and job creation, access to college, all of those decisions are decisions that emanate from the vote. And so if you're going to count in America, if you're going to be participating in the decisions that are being made, you have to vote. And when I hear people say, well, I don't get into voting, well, you don't count.
Well, thank you very much. Let me move on to Brother Richardson. As a young man, I'm not sure what generation you're, Generation X, whichever one it is, they count these things. What do you see as being the significance, the importance of us turning up at the polls?
Thank you, Brother Harris. Let me just open with this statement. Very important here. especially with our focus on Black men this evening. Black men, we are a threat. Let's put this out there. Historically, it is the Black man that faced persecution and execution before Black women and all others. Still today, it is the Black man who really has to work triple hard to prove that we belong. We have to first recognize our value, our worth. From our roots, we were sought because of our build and our biology. It is why there is a longing, a call to action that typically goes out to Black men first. If only there were Black fathers, they say. If only there were Black male mentors. If only there were, and the list goes on. We must recognize our power, our strength. We must lead by example. That is why I'm honored to join this evening, this panel, because we as Black men either allow to happen or were forced to allow by systemic racism the following. Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. You've heard that. It did not say Black men are the backbone of the Democratic Party. Black women outnumber Black men in college. Black men disproportionately occupy prison cells. Black men disproportionately are missing from homes. Why? So Black men cannot take the blame, but we often take the bait. If the system was built upon our vulnerability as Black men, we have to do all we can to stay away from that system. It is those vulnerabilities that are exploited in such an election as now. You have seen it come out in news articles, rappers and all. It is the vulnerabilities that are being exploited. And so the way you beat the system, you be a part of the system. There are multiple systems. And so when you're talking about systemic racism, that's the root, the implicit bias, that's the root. And so Brother Congressman Scott, he mentioned about the opportunities in this election. There's no opportunity to stay at home and not participate because you then become being governed by your inferiors, those who do not have your interest at heart. So again, it goes down to that root, the systemic problem. And it's how society looks at us, perceives us. We're a threat. So what do? You stand up, we take our place, we participate.
Let me ask Bill Clerk, with your organization, Mr. Kirk, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. With your organization, how are you combating this misinformation, disinformation, the things that are out there targeted in many ways specifically to Black males to try to keep them from going to the polls? How are you combating that?
Well, I'm going to answer your question if I can just say something in terms of the previous two comments.
Sure.
Congressman Scott used the example of his former colleague, but the reality is he would not be chairman of the Education and Labor Committee in the House with all of its authority and power if it were not for people exercising the vote. So that, and I know this is not a partisan political conversation, but the reality is it took the votes of people to elect his party as the majority party in the Congress in order for him to occupy that particular position. We also have a saying in DC, if you're not at the table participating, you may be on the menu. And so that's just a shorthand way of saying it is incumbent upon us to participate. To answer your question or address your question directly, I need to give you just a real quick snapshot of what Black Men Vote is. Black Men Vote was started by a group of folks who are politically conscious, who back in the 2012 presidential cycle were concerned that we were not going to have the same kind of turnout in 2012 for the first Black elected president, Barack Obama, who was running again, that we had in 2008. And so we formed this organization. We concentrated on a couple of areas, most particularly in Ohio and parts of your state, Congressman Scott, in Virginia. And we decided to actually meet young African-American men, kind of 18 to 35, 40, where they were. And so we engaged in a lot of techniques to hire consultants, people on the ground, use non-traditional means to meet folks where they were, to make sure they understood the importance of voting and what was at stake. And by a lot of people's recognition, we helped move the needle for the then president and his reelection efforts. We made the mistake of deciding that we didn't necessarily have to repeat this in 2016. That was a fatal error. And so in this cycle, we decided we needed to form this again. And to answer your point is we are using, in this day, in the COVID age, we're using lots of tools like social media. Brother Stewart there, if you go up on Instagram, you will see us. If you have seen some of our programming on Instagram Live on Tuesdays, where we actually interviewed the Floyd brothers. So the thing is, we're educating people about the importance of the content that's on our website, the content on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, combat some of the misinformation that you're talking about. And most importantly, we give people resources. We tell them for the last 2 months, we've been telling people how to register, about deadlines, where they can get information. And this collaboration with Joe and the other Black African-American sororities and fraternities started this past summer when they reached out to us, and we've been collaborating to try to get information out. In fact, tomorrow, we're actually going to be doing something we call a Party at the Polls, where we again are using resources and techniques that this generation probably relates to. We will have from 12:30 to about 7:30, we'll have a series of well-known, nationally known DJs spinning music on Instagram Live. We'll also have commentary periodically by Sister Yee, who's on the Rio, and we have people in North Carolina, in Philadelphia, and also in Florida, who are going to be on the ground, going around the polling places, giving out information for people to standing in lines. We're going to have resources so they can understand what's at stake, provide them sustenance, water with snacks and things like that. So I hope that addresses your question. If we have more time, I'll talk a little bit more about the things that we are planning to do. Right.
Okay. I want to go to Brother Stewart. Since you're the baby on the panel, what's the word on the street? What are the young men in your age cohort talking about? I get a little information when I go to the barber shop, although with the COVID-19, I haven't been able to go as frequently as I used to go, but that's where I pick up quite a bit of information about what the brothers are thinking. What are you hearing?
What's sad is that I hear a lot of young Black men as myself saying that I'm not going to vote because it's rigged. I'm not going to vote because my vote doesn't matter. My voice won't be heard. And with that being said, I want to go to a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, where he says, "Our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter." As a young Black man in America, we don't have the luxury to not vote. We don't have the luxury to not let our voice be heard, because we have known that this year itself, that tomorrow is not guaranteed, and that we will possibly will not even have this opportunity if we make it to the next 4 years. So now that we are coming up into an election now, it's so important to go out and get this done. We can all stand in line for Jordans. We can all stand in line for things that we love or materialistic things, but it's very sad to hear that a lot of Black men won't stand in line to make sure that they will be safe for the next couple of years, or their families will be safe. And to even think about it then, if you even have that mindset, you have now let the system win. You have let them beat you, because from years before, they tried every way possible to get us to not be able to vote. Literacy tests, poll taxes, intimidation. So now that we have this luxury now to be able to vote, I urge Black men to go out and take as many people, take as many friends as you can, stand in line however long it takes, because our ancestors were killed for us to be able to have this privilege. And it's crazy, because when I say that, I don't think they understand that when I say ancestors, that is your great great aunt, your great great grandpa, your great great grandmother. This is not that long ago. So that is what I'm hearing now, and I'm encouraging young Black men to really take this seriously, because it impacts your lives. Your lives truly depend on this election.
Brother Congressman Scott, what are we going to do on November the 4th? We've been very energized to get out and vote on November the 3rd. And I'm from Chicago. I remember being on the bus after Harold Washington was elected mayor. And there was a young Black man on the bus talking to his friend, and the bus, we went over a pothole. And the young man said to his friend, "Look at that. Harold Washington is the mayor, and look at the conditions we've got in our neighborhood." So what are we going to be doing the day after the election has been decided?
Well, the first thing we need to do is vote on election day. I think the most useless people I've seen in a long time were the people in 2016 who protested the day after the election. The day after the election, all I could think of was, where were y'all yesterday? No, elections have consequences. There's a lot we can do after the election, but elections have consequences. We've seen this in Virginia, where we've been trying to get gun safety legislation passed. We had a Republican majority, House Republican majority, Senate. We couldn't get a bill out of subcommittee. We couldn't change their hearts, so we changed their seats. We took over, and last year, we have odd year elections. Last year, we took over the House of Delegates and State Senate. As a result of those elections, we passed gun safety legislation that has been signed by the governor. Now, in years past, people would come out and protest. We need gun safety legislation, nothing. This year, after the election, you saw a lot of protests with people carrying guns. They took over Capitol Hill, but we passed those bills anyway because we won the election. There's a lot you can do to help your legislation along, but there's nothing you can do that's more important than win the election. And so we need to make sure that we win the election. After the election, we can remind the people that we elected what the agenda is. If we win, if we lose, it's going to be hard to effectuate that agenda. But so, things like healthcare. This administration will try to destroy healthcare. They put a lady on the Supreme Court who is known to be adverse to the Affordable Care Act. There is a case coming up next week that can have the effect of destroying the entire Affordable Care Act. Lock, stock, and barrel. Pre-existing conditions, affordability credits, caps on everything, the whole thing. If we elect the right people, we can, with the president, with a good Senate and a good House, we can legislatively fix whatever damage they do. If they win the election, they will be able to sabotage, they will be able to keep the sabotage in place, and there will be nothing that we can do about it. This is a consequence of the election. We need to make sure that we have a president, a Senate, and a House that can repair the damage that the Supreme Court's going to do. They have done everything they can do to try to sabotage the Affordable Care Act. They promise. I saw one member of the Senate during the hearings of the Supreme Court nominee, a hearing they said 4 years ago they promised not to hold can't fill a vacancy in an election year. They promised not to do it. And in that hearing, he promised to protect people with pre-existing conditions. After he had voted for bills to sabotage pre-existing conditions, and a lot of Republican members had signed the amicus brief to the Supreme Court, encouraging the Supreme Court to find the whole thing unconstitutional. The fact is, if they win the election, if they maintain the Senate or the White House or take over the House, they will be able to sabotage the Affordable Care Act. Just remember that when the bill that John McCain put his thumbs down on was a bill, essentially the same bill that passed the House, that CBO's Congressional Budget Office evaluated. Costs would go up. If that thing passed, costs would go up 20%. 20-some million fewer people would have insurance, and the protections for pre-existing conditions would start evaporating. That's their plan. They have no other plan. Elections have consequences, so the focus has to be on tomorrow, not on the day after tomorrow. It has to be on tomorrow, and then after tomorrow, we'll see what we have to work with. We've got a good Senate and a good House and a good president. We can have all kinds of imagination about what we're going to do. If we mess up and decide not to vote and sit at home, we'll be in a situation where it's all defense and how bad it's going to get.
Thank you. Brother Richardson, I hope you have some perspective on this, but you might not be old enough to have seen these changes that have taken place. But the current occupant of the White House says that he's done more for Black people than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. How do you respond to that?
Brother Harris, it was meant for you to ask me this question. So, when it comes to, and it goes back to what our college brother was mentioning about what he's hearing on the street. Black men not wanting to be engaged in this process. But really what Black men want to know is what's in it for me, because nothing has changed. Nothing is really changing. And then that's what makes you question what has happened over the last 4 years to help me as a Black man. So let's talk about this. Over the last 4 years as a Black man, you still have been pulled over by the police because you are a Black man. Our parents, grandparents, and all, even, the younger, the ones without a driver license, has been, told that you keep your hands on the wheel. Do not reach down. Why? We're told to watch the car we drive. We're told to watch our jewelry. We cannot have a pocket of money. We should not have guns. We cannot play loud music. We cannot be arrested, because the result of a simple traffic stop is being killed. The result of a mental health call is being killed. The result of running away is being killed. So see, we understand that our entire livelihood could be snatched away if we are arrested. And so we run. And then the police and many firearm carriers are trained to stop the threat, not kill the threat. And so running away is not a threat. So let's talk about a legislation, a bill that the current administration signed into law called the First Step Act. Because we have a candidate who continues to go about saying what you said, Brother Harris. I've done more. So in the reform of criminal justice, that candidate is referring to the First Step Act. Let's be clear. The First Step Act focuses on federal drug charges. What are the charges and, of course, the convictions, ultimately, of many other Black men in prison? This particular law is focusing on the federal drug charges. And so President Obama in 2010 signed the Fair Sentencing Act. What the First Step Act did was to make the Obama law retroactive, where your sentences are lessened. That's what it did. But remember what I said in the opening about systemic racism. This First Step Act did not hold police accountable who arrest you for that drug charge because, again, you are just stopped because you're Black male, and then just so happen they find you with some drug paraphernalia that then leads you into the system. And so this First Step Act does not address a majority of Black men, because a majority of the Black people and the Black men are not impacted by drug charges. We actually are being incarcerated and arrested just for any reason. And so at that point, what do? We're stuck in the system. And when we're talking about voting, when you're stuck in the system, it's intentional, because that then removes your right to vote. Because again, that goes back to the beginning when they understand the threat, the power in that. And then the other elephant in the room is talking about the 1994 crime bill. Let me go ahead and put that out there, because there's a misunderstanding by Black men, and it's being pushed by a lot of people, and you know, not just men, but saying that the crime bill locked up Black men, disproportionately affected Black men. Let's set the record straight. A majority of Blacks in America, 58% to be exact, supported this bill. They went to then Senator Joe Biden to ask to do something about the rise in crimes and the drugs in the community, ravaging the community. That's what that was about. And then the Congressional Black Caucus signed on to support this bill. They asked him to do something. This bill was not intended to go after we as Black men. But what is left out of the conversation is the anti-drug bill, the anti-drug abuse bill that came prior to that. The anti-drug abuse bill is really what led to the incarceration, the mass incarceration, because again, of all of the drug abuses that was happening. And so then it was not Joe Biden to write that anti-drug abuse bill. It was another of his colleagues. And so what Joe Biden's bill, that again, he was asked to do by the Black people, he wrote that bill that actually had some benefits, and it had some unintended consequences because it just so happened it was mostly minorities that were committing the drug crimes. But the bill was written to address that. And so this particular crime bill actually had benefits such as community policing, drug treatment and programs for young people. It also contained the Violence Against Women Act. We don't talk about those other parts. It also had a ban on assault weapons, which reduced homicides by firearms. But that bill came after that bill, like I said, the anti-drug abuse bill, okay? And so if this bill did not exist, the anti-drug abuse bill, then the 94 crime bill would have been less severe. So we need to take that out of our Black male community, pointing at one candidate that he woke up and said that this is what he wanted to do. That's not what the truth is. So we need a president who will address police misconduct that lead to those arrests, again, just based on our color of our skin, not one who condones it. Because we have another candidate who does not believe in systemic racism exists. That's the problem. That's the root. And so Black men, listen, if you're listening, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, that is right now sitting without action from the Senate. So when we're talking about what is in this election for me, all of that stuff, all of those arrests for just you being a male, a Black male, is being addressed by this single bill here. The Justice in Policing Act is the first ever bold, comprehensive approach to hold police accountable, end racial profiling, change the culture of law enforcement, empower our communities, and build trust between law enforcement and our communities by addressing systemic racism. Do you want to know where it's at right now? It's collecting dust in the Senate. Do you want to know why? Because there's a different party in control of the Senate, And there's a different party in control of the White House right now that has no interest in getting that bill that would help you. But when we're talking about voting down ballot and voting for a whole party, when brother Congressman Scott was talking about, if there's control by one party in the White House, the Senate, and the House, this bill that speaks to exactly the thing that is the root of the problem, the systemic racism by police misconduct, this will be passed. That's in it for you if you go to that poll tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brother Richardson. I think Brother Scott has a comment.
But yeah, I have to comment on the crime bill because I was on the crime subcommittee when that bill passed. Brother Richardson mentioned a few of the good things in the bill. Regrettably, the bill included a lot of red slogans and sound bites that were the order of the day in politics at the time. And I led the opposition. Majority of the Black Caucus, as it's been referenced, actually voted for it, but I was leading the opposition. Joe Biden today has acknowledged that the bill primarily went in the wrong direction. And if you look at his plan for the next 4 years, it is a different direction. In fact, like I said, nobody fought harder against that crime bill than I did. I was appointed by Joe Biden to be the lead person on his crime task force to establish the agenda for the next 4 years. There's a unity task force, Biden and Bernie Sanders. I was selected by Joe Biden to be his chair of that unity task force. If you look at what's in the Democratic platform, that's what we put into the platform. It is a progressive agenda, focused a lot on prevention, early intervention, prevention, early intervention, rehabilitation, the kinds of things that we want. Getting rid of mandatory minimums, which were a major part of the crime bill. Getting rid of the death penalty, which was a major part of the crime bill. Joe Biden acknowledges that there were a lot of mistakes in that legislation. We're not voting on Joe Biden from 28 years ago. We're voting on Joe Biden for the next 4 years. And anybody has a problem with what happened, that a lot of people, as Brother Richardson pointed out, that was the politics of the day. Slogans and sound bites. All it got us was mass incarceration. We need to go in a different direction, and Joe Biden is willing to lead in that new direction.
Mr. Kirk, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, a quick comment on this conversation. First of all, Brother Richardson, you're being very kind to Donald Trump. The fact is he's just a liar. I mean, he lies through his teeth. He distorts history. He tries to take credit for things that he has nothing to do with. So on the crime issue, first of all, you're an attorney as well. Most incarcerations happen at the state level. The explosion in incarceration is because of state crimes, and not so much. Yes, there's been an increase in federal incarceration, but most of it happens at the state level. And it was because certain parties over the last 2 decades controlled a lot of state legislatures, and they criminalized a lot of behavior, and they were targeting our folk. That's the first thing. The second thing, he lies. Let me just go. One of the most galling things that the current occupant of the White House talks about is his support for historically Black college universities. I happen to know, I'm in DC, Congressman Scott can tell you, Congressional Black Caucus has done more for HBCUs than anybody. It's the Congress who appropriates the money. They pass the laws. Donald Trump tries to take credit for it. He does photo ops in the White House, and he puts a lot of the HBCU presidents in a compromising position. But the larger point that needs to be looked at, it's not so much of what he says he takes credit for, which is 2 or 3 things. Think about everything that he has done that has been harmful to African Americans. So just start with the area that we're talking about, criminal justice. Donald Trump has actually been the largest defunder of the police than any other president in history. And why did he do that? Because he decided that he didn't like anything that Barack Obama did. Barack Obama and the Biden administration, Biden, they got the Congress to pass a lot of community policing and all of that. He got rid of all of that, right? Okay. So what has he done? Our communities are disproportionately impacted by environmental issues. What has he done? He has gone in and relaxed lots of environmental regulation that affects us, right? What has he done? Just recently, he issued an executive order canceling issues having to do with any kind of discussion within the federal system about implicit bias and discrimination, right? I mean, so on a whole series of things, it's not so much what he says, the 2 or 3 things that he tries to say he did. He's done a whole host of things that have brought a lot of harm. And the final point I wanted to say, in terms of to Brother Harris, your comment about what do we do? I agree with Congressman that we have to focus on tomorrow. But one of the things we have to do is we have to sustain whatever gains we make tomorrow. We have to sustain it. We have to understand that the education of our people is just not in one season. It's just not when an election is coming up at the federal level. The congressman said they're going to be off-year elections in Virginia. It has to be people being willing to work over the next year to make sure that people understand what's at stake in Virginia, because they're going to be coming. Virginia is now, quote unquote, a blue state. They're going to be coming for us, right? In Virginia. So we have to sustain that. And we have to understand that it's down ballot, and it's the Congress. It's just not the president, it's the Congress. The last 2 times we had the alignment of one-party Democrats having House, Senate, and the White House. 2 years later, we lost it. We lost the control of the Congress. And why is that? Because that party, I know this is nonpartisan, but this is my view, my personal view. The Republican Party left a mess. Democrats take the hard work to clean it up, and then we pay the price. That was the pattern for Clinton, and that was the pattern for Obama. And if we're not diligent, and if we don't understand that this is not about one day, but this is about ensuring that we are going to sustain our interest in our civic engagement over the long haul.
Thank you very much, Brother Stewart. Before we go on to our General President, I hope he's standing by. What are you hearing regarding concerns for student debt? And will you be coming out with student debt, or have you been fortunate enough not to accumulate student debt? But what are you hearing from your cohorts regarding student debt, and what do they think about this election and the amount of money that they might owe?
I will say that I do have student debt. I don't have that much, gratefully. But I do have student debt, and what I'm hearing is that is one thing that is winning the youth over with Joe Biden, of hearing that could possibly be erased. But then again, I hear a lot of men saying, "Oh, I'm just going to go into the reserve because they say they're going to take my debt away. So I don't even have to worry about the election," which is also a problem then. So it's kind of hard to have these conversations and understanding that this is not just a now thing, it's going to affect you in the future. So that is definitely what I'm hearing now is, I'm going to vote for Biden because I hear that I could get all of my debt erased. But other than that is all I'm hearing.
Good.
Brother Harris, it's interesting that total student debt is $1.5 trillion, which is exactly the same as the cost of the tax cut. 80% of the benefits went to the top 1% in corporations. Those are the kinds of choices that are being made. We can help people with student debt, or we can help top 1% in corporations. Same amount of money. And that's why young people need to vote.
Okay.
Brother Harris, if I can just add on quickly in reference to that tax bill, because again, another issue for the black males to consider, there is again the unemployment that's being talked about, saying the highest unemployment rate. But understand this tax bill, what it really did, it, again, the top 1%, it helped those corporations to pay less taxes, and sometimes, in some cases, less taxes than, and then of course, rich, as we have seen, $750 is less than what many of you might pay. And so that tax bill was not in everyone's favor. It was not in your favor as a Black male, because just a recent report came out saying actually there was something snuck in that bill that's going to increase taxes for the low income, the middle class. And so when we were talking about this tax bill, it really didn't help. And in that tax bill, he also likes to talk about the opportunity zones. These zones actually has been found that they give capital gain tax cuts to, again, the wealthy to build projects in poor urban areas. And as one author put it, the incentive is not going to drive investment in our areas, in the poorest areas. Developers will look for the least poor blocks that qualify for the tax cut and build there. And so in practice, the designation of which areas get the tax credit has been hopelessly abused, so that well-connected builders can go into already gentrifying neighborhoods, those neighborhoods that we're getting pushed out of, and get lucrative tax breaks for projects they wanted to build anyway, such as Jaguar dealerships, pet spas, and luxury playgrounds for the rich. So in other words, these opportunity zones is being pitched like it's helping our community, but actually it's helping the builder get some tax cuts and making them richer. And we getting pushed out because of our property taxes going up. And so we have a candidate also who's proposing a $15,000 tax credit for your first home. So if you live in an apartment right now, or you renting a home, you have an opportunity to get your first home because of a candidate that says you can get up to a $15,000 tax credit for your first home. That speaks to the access to wealth.
Very good comment. See, Brother Paul, do we have any questions from outside before you bring forward our General President? Brother Paul? Oh, here he is. Okay.
Hey, good evening, my brothers. Outstanding conversation, first of all. Everyone's really, really gripped on every single word. We do have one question, and that's, what do you believe is behind some Black men choosing to support the current president, Donald Trump?
Congressman, I'm going to take this because I want you to keep your cool. So let's speak some real truth here. If we look in history, we've always had people who have helped the oppressor. Right? We've always had people help the oppressor. So I'm gonna put it out there. There are some people who are doing this because they believe that they want to help massa. We always had the house Negro and the field Negro. In apartheid, we had, in South Africa, apartheid, the Afrikaners couldn't control that whole group unless there were Black people who did that. And if we go back even further, Black people didn't get to this country simply because it was white Europeans who went and picked us up in Africa. There were always people who were, in my view, who were not, let me be polite, who were not acting in a way in which they should be acting. I was going to say something else, and I don't want to do that. So I believe that a fair number of people, not all, there are some people who are truly misinformed, but there's some folk, hey, they just decide, I'm going to align myself with the man, and that's what they're doing. So that's my view. I'm sorry to be a little radical on that, but I think that's true, right?
Let me say, there's a lot of misinformation. President Trump has talked about the bad economy he inherited and how we fixed it. The number in terms of jobs per year in the last 3 years of the Obama administration, each of those years produced more jobs than each of the first 3 years of the Trump administration before he mishandled the pandemic. All first 3 years of the Trump administration had lower job production than all of the first 3 years of Obama. let me do a little what they call low-tech screen share here. This is a chart of unemployment rate. President Trump brags about the unemployment rate. When the Obama stimulus came in, it's right here. Wait a minute, let me get it. It's right here, right at the top of the unemployment. And as a result, the unemployment rate dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. Trump came in and here somewhere. You don't see a wrinkle in the graph on the unemployment rate. Obama got it down from about 10 to about 4.5, and it kept going down to 3.5. And President Trump is prancing around like he did it all by himself. When you get just the conclusion that it is the lowest rate, but it gets low because of what Obama did. Jobs created last 3 years of Obama. Each of those last 3 years better than the first each of the last 3 years, first 3 years of Trump. Those are the facts, but nobody ever calls him on it, and he's been getting away with suggesting that he is responsible for a good economy, and people like jobs. And so when they believe his gaslighting, you know, they might actually vote that way. But if you follow the facts, the economy is the Obama economy until President Trump mismanaged the pandemic and things went off the chart.
Hey, Congressman, you should tell them that in 2009, when the president was inaugurated, President Obama, there was actually negative job growth. He was hemorrhaging. He inherited an economy that was hemorrhaging between 400,000 and 700,000 jobs a month. So there was negative job growth. He got it back up to positive job growth and the numbers that you just talked about.
Okay, since we're talking about jobs, you know, as Black males, we have to really consider what type of jobs are being created and from whomever. What type of jobs? Are these good paying jobs? Because no matter how much somebody brag about the lowest unemployment rate and the most jobs created and all of this, again, this tax cut that allows a lot of these businesses not pay taxes, and then suddenly, you know, they're pocketing and then offering all these jobs, but they're low paying jobs. Is that really lifting you from poverty? Is that really giving you access to wealth when you get a job at the minimum wage of $7.25, what it is now, and you have another candidate who's proposing a minimum wage of $15? So when you're talking about the right job, you're talking about you're needing a good paying job, because you don't want to get what, you know, is being offered right now, low paying jobs, you know, from all of these job creation, so-called job creation, low paying job that requires you to have to get another job and 3 jobs to equal one good paying job that another candidate is proposing.
Well, there are a lot of things. You mentioned the minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
The minimum wage job that passed the House, $15 an hour. I introduced the president. He'd veto it if it came to his desk. The PRO Act, those that belong to unions, make more wages, and there's no wage gap, equal pay for equal work, no black, white, no men, women wage gap. He said that was my bill too. It passed the House. It would help people make more wages. He'd veto that. College affordability, the best jobs go to those with the best education, being able to get a good education without crushing debt. We're working on that. The president has not been helpful. Those are the kinds of things that can help wealth. And of course, fighting discrimination. This administration has done nothing to fight discrimination, and we passed several bills that are languishing over in the Senate because Republicans don't want to fight discrimination. And the number one thing you've already mentioned that can help deal with wealth disparity are home ownership opportunities, because that's where most middle-class families find most of their wealth, equity in their homes. And so we need those. There are a lot of things we can do, but this administration has not been helpful. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be helpful.
When you have a candidate,
just a second. Let me ask Mr. Kirk, given the polls that are showing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the lead. We have a question that came in indicating that the polls in 2016 had Hillary Clinton, and she did win, of course, the popular vote. But what message should we take from these polls?
Okay, so just to go back to 2016 for a minute, if you look at the data, the election was decided by about 70 to 75,000 votes spread across 3 states. So that was, and that emphasizes again why it's so important to vote, because all you have to do is win a state by 50% plus 1, and then you get those electoral votes. Here's where I think the difference is, and here's what we're trying to do to change those things, at least in our small shop. The first thing is that there was most elections are won by a small band, national elections by a band of about 15, maybe sometimes 20%. All right, and those are independents, and those are people who are truly undecided, who decide what they're going to go. There were enough of those people in 2016 who decided, for whatever reason, I'm going to give Donald Trump a chance. Some people just didn't like Mrs. Clinton. Some people bought into what Trump was saying. Some people, thought that because he was allegedly a good businessman, that he was going to be a good steward of the economy. So that's really what happened. What's going on now, if you look at some of the polls and if you go into them a little bit more deeply, you'll see that there are a lot of those people who, in that middle band, who decided that they were going to give Donald Trump a chance. They've decided that they're not going to give him a second chance for a variety of reasons. Some of it has to do with his rhetoric, some has to do with his policies, some has to do with him being divisive, et cetera, et cetera. So that's that middle band that's really going to decide the election. The second thing that's different is that, frankly, in 16, we Black people didn't do our job. We just didn't. In certain states, we didn't turn out. The data shows that in a state like Wisconsin, the difference between the turnout for President Obama in 2012 and for Hillary Clinton in 2016, there was about a 30% drop off in African-American participation. That's men and women and young people, right? Now, again, there are reasons for that we probably don't have time to get into all of that, but we didn't do our job, right? So what we have to do this time is back to the main focus. We've got to do our job. And the cohort of Black men, particularly in that cohort between 18 and 40, we have to do everything we can do to encourage them to participate. And that's what I know what all the Greek organizations are doing. That's what we're doing. There are others similar to us we're doing. And if I can, just a shameless plug, because we're going to be working with the Alphas, just go to blackmenvote.org and you'll see some of this data and you'll see some of the things that we're doing. But those are some of the reasons for the difference. And that's why I have hope. I think if the polls are showing that we are coming out. I mean, I grew up in Texas. The vote in Texas is tremendous. They'll probably, not only does Biden have a chance of winning in Texas, but we may flip the control of the state legislature in Texas, right? So we are doing our job. And as Congressman Scott is saying, as long as we continue to do our job and don't let up through tomorrow, we should have a good outcome, at least an outcome that I'll be happy with and that I'll smile on the 4th, right?
Brother Scott, did you want to add something?
No, I think that's a good analysis. I think there's another aspect that's not happening the last 2 or 3 weeks because of a number of reasons, one of which was Comey's, FBI Director Comey coming up with reopening the email travesty. Hillary Clinton's numbers were tanking the last 2 weeks. Joe Biden's numbers have remained steady, and half the people have already voted. So trying to make up in the last couple of days is going to be very difficult. But actually, a lot of if you take California, New York, Massachusetts, and Maryland, that's about 25% of the country. And if you look at those states, we've got about a 25% lead. And so that would be just state, if that's all the lead, everything else is even, that'd be about a 6% lead in the nation. And so if we're leading by 5%, we're actually underwater in 46 states. This is a state-by-state contest, not a national contest. And you got to go state by state. There are a lot of states where it's close. And if you look at the toss-ups, it would not be a surprise if Trump won all the toss-ups. I hope we don't have to. I hope it doesn't come down to we got to win Georgia or Texas in order to win this election. Those are now toss-ups, but he can win. He can win North Carolina. He can win Iowa and Ohio. Arizona, we haven't won in about 30 years. He can win all of the toss-ups. And then it's if he wins Arizona and Pennsylvania, he's in. So it's a lot closer than it actually looks on the numbers. Now, I think if we win our fair share of the toss-ups, it's going to be a landslide. But with a little luck on Trump's part, he could win all the toss-ups, and then he's within Pennsylvania and Arizona of winning the election. I think we've had a nice little lead, a little teeny lead, but it's been consistent, about 4 points. And if there's if the pollsters know what they're talking about, we're going to be okay. We've got Michigan and Wisconsin. I think those are pretty secure, and Minnesota, which was tight. But Pennsylvania and Arizona are two. If we lose both of those, then we're talking about trying to win Texas and Georgia, North Carolina, and Ohio in order to maintain. I hope it doesn't come to that. So it's actually deceptively close. Now, if we win North Carolina, if we win Florida, people are going to ask me, well, why did you think it was close? We ran away with it. So it could be a landslide, but it's deceptively close because he could win all of the toss-ups.
Thank you very much. I think that we're getting ready to bring in the General President, Brother Paul. There he is. Welcome, Brother General President.
Thank you so much, brothers. There are two things I'd like for you to talk about briefly before we leave. COVID-19 has impacted the African-American community in a tremendous way. Latest research says that African Americans are nearly 3 times more likely to be infected than white citizens, and with Latinos citizens, it's even higher than in African American community. Give us your thoughts with regard to why this election is so important to deal with not only COVID-19, but just health disparities within the African American community around such issues, not only the many health disparities, but also environmental justice issues that impact our health as well. Can you all talk about that for just a moment? Because I think it's too important for us not to discuss COVID-19. Every day I know people personally that will call and tell me that they've lost relatives or colleagues or someone that they've known to COVID-19. Can you talk about that for just a moment?
Oh, Brother Scott, would you like to start off?
I was saying you're on mute. Basically, Brother Ward, it's a question of science. Are we going to follow the science, or are you going to follow the politics? Jared Kushner was caught on tape by Bob Woodward saying their early strategy in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic was to get the doctors out of the way so the politicians and the messengers could have the front row and control the message. That ought to scare people to death. You have rallies where they are chanting "Fire Dr. Fauci," that ought to scare people to death. It's just a sense of whether or not, and there are multiple reports of the politicians in the White House leaning on the Centers for Disease Control to actually change their recommendations to be a better political message. The question of whether you're going to have the scientists and the doctors leading the charge or the politicians treating it as a political challenge, not as a health challenge. You've got exactly the same thing in climate, in the environment, where the climate situations are, you can't even say, you can't even talk about the climate and talk about science. It has to be, you just end the conversation. You've got to go to science if you're going to do anything about the environment. We got out of the Paris Accord. We're not doing anything about the future. The young people are going to inherit an environment that is disastrous. Climate change is real. You see all these hurricanes and everything. We need to, and the president has ridiculed Joe Biden for trying to wean our way out of fossil fuels, and we got to go with the science. And either you're going to go with the science or you're going to go with the political rhetoric. That there's climate change, and it's also how we're going to deal with the pandemic. I would like to follow somebody that's going to follow the science. I'd rather have somebody in charge following the science.
Brother Richardson, you have some thoughts here?
Yes, indeed, Brother Harris. So we, as a race of people, as Blacks, we have been disproportionately impacted by this virus. So when you see that number of 230,000+ deaths, we have a large share of those deaths as a part of our community. And when you're talking about what to vote for tomorrow, you want to vote to get out of this mess. Because there is uncertainty around, if we have 4 more years of this failed leadership, are we going to ever get out of it? What if we have another pandemic? Someone who doesn't believe in science? So are you willing to take that risk for the next 4 years by either staying at home, i.e. not voting, approving of this mishandling of this pandemic that may have touched your family? So by voting for 4 more years of this, or we haven't mentioned this, voting for someone else on the ticket, a third party that you know and that research shows and that there's in history shows that has no chance of winning the presidency. So that is essentially a vote in favor of 4 more years. So we have to understand what's really hurting our community right now. COVID-19, criminal justice, the racial profiling continues. And we have someone in charge right now who does not believe in science, who does not believe in systemic racism, the root of the problems plaguing our community. Just that alone should get us out to the poll tomorrow and call someone else, tell as many people, go out, because I want to save, this is what you should, I want to save our community from this. There's no certainty. And let me tell you, any candidate, before they have the power of the seat, all they're telling you are plans. It is, again, like Brother Congressman Scott says, the legislative power, the spending power goes to Congress. So you can hear all of these glorious things that they say that they have done. But again, like HBCU funding, that would not have been possible without Congress. Thank you, Congress. All of these things that deal with money are got to come from Congress. So that's why it's important for you to go out tomorrow and vote up and down the ticket for that party that you know is going to get these bills that have been collecting dust passed, such as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So when you go to the poll tomorrow and be in that long line, when you are asked about that voter ID, That's because of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act that John Lewis died talking about, leaving us with the charge that we need to restore this fully. And we won't have to experience all these voter suppression tactics. Guess what? If you vote tomorrow to end the voting suppression tactics, now that's again plaguing our community. Polls being switched and changed, relocated without our knowledge. That will be unacceptable if the full Voting Rights Act would be enforced. And we can vote tomorrow up and down the ticket to make sure this Voting Rights Act passed, along with the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act for police misconduct, and a lot more bills that affect our community. And we can stand up as Black males to join the Black women who have historically been the backbone of the party. Let's make Black women and Black men the backbone of this party.
Very well said. Brother Ward, you have any other comments as we begin to wrap up? We can't hear you, Brother Ward.
Brothers, I want to thank you so much for what you've done tonight. This is further evidence of how important it is for us to take the time to deconstruct, to analyze, and to discuss issues and get the facts. It's facts versus fiction. And what we've heard tonight is multiple reasons why we need to vote, not only as a people, but also especially as African-American men and men in general. We need to vote in this election. Political propaganda is alive and well in this election cycle. It has reached an all-time high. And so it's important for us to vote based on facts, vote based on true legislative policies that we know will have a direct benefit to our community. Thank all of you on behalf of our fraternity for your leadership and your courageous commitment to stand for justice and freedom in the midst of everything. And you know, there are so many of us, our noted historian, Brother Harris, we could have a whole discussion about the propaganda that's being shown throughout the nation, especially when you have someone that feels so miseducated that they can compare themselves to Abraham Lincoln. And if they really knew American history, they would know that that is not a favorable comment at all. So let us keep on, my brothers, doing what is truly the Alpha tradition: scholarship, leadership, and service. We're going to keep doing this. And to a comment that was made earlier, tomorrow we're going to vote in record number and stand in the lines as long as we need to make certain that our right is adhered to tomorrow. But on early Wednesday morning, on November the 4th, we're going to start immediately working, because politics is 365 days of the year, 24/7. So we've got work to do starting on November the 4th. But tomorrow, all alpha men and all men of goodwill, go to the polls, take other people with you, and let's make certain that this country does not take any backward steps, because that goes against everything that we believe as men of Alpha. Onward and upward always, and never backwards. Thank you, my brothers. This has been a great evening.
Thank you, Brother Ward. Brother Paul, wrap us up.
I would like to do just that. This has been an outstanding presentation of our brothers. We can tell from our audience comments. And folks, I just want to leave you with a few comments. The vote is precious. It's almost sacred. It's the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democracy, in a democratic society, and we've got to use it. The late, great Congressman John Lewis. Folks, if you're thinking about not voting, you need to be comfortable with being silenced. If you're thinking about not voting, you need to be comfortable with someone else determining your future for you. If you're thinking about not voting, you must exercise your right to vote. Voter suppression is very real. You heard comments from our esteemed panel of guests. If your vote didn't mean so much, believe me, they wouldn't try so hard to keep you from doing it. We have an army of Alpha lawyers standing by to assist on election day. So to report any issues that you see at the polls, please call 1-833-BM-VOTE-1. 1-833-BM-VOTE-1 to report any issues at the poll. Remember, a voteless people is a hopeless people. We expect you to show up, show out, and take your rights to the poll. vote.